Doing a recording. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. This is our slideshow introduction for our topic on the Roman Empire. This presentation will include how the Roman Empire rose to power, how it declined, and the legacy it left behind for the world we live in today. We start with our essential question. Our essential question is, how did the Roman Empire rise, fall, and leave behind a legacy for the world? So we're going to be looking at three topics here. And three things we want to be able to discuss or write about at the end of this is, how did the Roman Empire rise to power? How did it fall and decline? And what did it do that affects the world we live in today? The first topic we're going to look at is called the rise and expansion of Rome. In this section, we'll learn how the empire began and how it expanded. The Romans thrived around the Mediterranean Sea from about 500 BC to 500 AD. That's approximately about 1,000 years. So the Roman civilization was about a 1,000-year period. Rome itself really began as a city in what we would call the city of Rome in what is today Italy. It then would conquer most of Europe and parts of North Africa and Southwest Asia. Before the expansion, though, the Italian peninsula, as it is called, you can see here that today the country of Italy, it's a peninsula sticking out into the Mediterranean Sea, surrounded by three sides of water. On the Italian peninsula, there were three different groups that existed on the peninsula around 500 BC. They were the Latins, the Etruscans, and the Greeks. And by about 500 BC, the Latins kind of took control in central Italy, and they founded the city of Rome. The city of Rome was built on 7 hills that were located on the Tiber River, and this protected the city from harsh weather as well as invaders. And the Latins eventually became known as the Romans, and they built the city of Rome and began conquering kind of the nearby countryside and nearby parts of Italy. The first kind of governments of this Rome was the earliest governments were ruled by kings. So really, Rome was like a kingdom ruled by a king, and that was where one person had sole power. The last king of Rome was a ruthless and harsh king that became known as Tarquin the Proud. He was chased out of power by the Romans because of his harsh rule, and in this portrait you can see he's committing acts of violence against women in his kingdom. The Romans then decided that they were going to create a different style of government to rule over them. They created what became known as a republic. A republic is a government in which citizens vote for their leaders. We live in a republic today. Most countries in the world today are republics. The key understanding here is that citizens who vote for their leaders in ancient Rome were property-owning men who were free-born. What this means is that slaves, women, and the poor couldn't vote in the Roman Republic. So when we say it's a government in which the people elect their leaders, well, not all the people were allowed to do that, just the citizens who are a particular type of person. The Roman Republic expanded beyond Italy through military conquest for the next 400 years. They conquered parts of North Africa, what was known as Carthage. They conquered Egypt, parts of Egypt and Syria in North Africa and the Middle East. They conquered Greece and Asia Minor, and they even would expand to parts of Western Europe. And it slowly started to conquer all the territories around the Mediterranean. Around 45 BC, a very powerful Roman general named Julius Caesar came to power. At this time, Rome was in the middle of a very chaotic civil war. As the leader of the Roman military, he marched the Roman army into the city of Rome, and he restored order. He basically disbanded the republic and decided that he was going to become the sole ruler of a Roman empire. He declared himself the ruler of Rome. Because of the squabbling and the fighting between different factions and groups, Caesar believed that Rome's future would only be secure under the power of one ruler. So thus he establishes an empire, which is much different than a republic. An empire is you have a sole ruler who rules over many different people and many different lands. Julius Caesar was assassinated, killed by his political enemies for attempting to take too much power. So while he did this, many of the senators and politicians eventually stabbed him in the back and assassinated him. But regardless, he had already worked to establish this new empire. After his death, his adopted son, Octavian, won a power struggle and became the first real official emperor of the Roman Empire. He took on the name Augustus Caesar, and he would rule over a very peaceful period in Roman history. Under Augustus' rule, Rome entered a time of peace, and he ruled over somewhere between 60 to 100 million people from different cultures and religions across the empire. This is really kind of the extent of Roman power. To manage Rome's empire, they broke it up into provinces or different districts. So to rule over so many different people and so many different cultures, they would have these provinces or regions, and they'd have like a local magistrate or a local governor that would be in charge of that area. One of these provinces was a place called Judah, which was home to the Jewish people. A Jewish holy man named Jesus began teaching and became the leader of what would become a new religion called Christianity. Christianity is a religion based on the teachings of Jesus. Jesus' teachings captured the attention of people throughout the land. One of the key components to his teachings was the preaching of nonviolence, that people should work to not commit violence against one another because it's wrong in the eyes of God. The Romans saw his teachings as a threat to his power. If the Roman Empire was going to continue to expand and use armies, it couldn't have a holy man preaching nonviolence. So they had him executed. Political opponents were often crucified during the Roman Empire, and the crucifixion is a very grotesque form of public humiliation and public death. But after his death, small numbers of people across the empire began worshiping his life and his teachings. They were really the first Christians. For several centuries, the Roman Empire had attacked and jailed many Christians. Some were forced to fight to the death in gladiatorial games and colosseums. Christians threatened Roman rule because they taught nonviolence and peace. So this is the end of this first chunk, and we have a few questions here. The first one is, how did Roman government change over time? And what places did the Roman Empire expand and conquer? So you want to take a few minutes to kind of look over your notes or look over what you've written down, think about your responses to these questions. In this section, we're going to learn how the empire fell slowly over time, both internal and external reasons. So internally, how did the empire fall? And externally, or outside the empire, how did it fall? The Roman Empire began to fall as early as the 100s AD. Years before it actually did. Many reasons included internal and external reasons caused by the empire's slowly falling apart. So it's not like Rome fell in a single day or even in a single year. It slowly fell apart over several hundred years. By around 200 AD, it was already starting to have big problems. Part of the problem is it had expanded too much. It reached too far. Because Rome was a military empire, it needed to continue conquering new land in order to grow. No new conquest meant no new sources of money. They don't have new tax money come in. If they can't get new soldiers to file into the ranks of the army, then it's slowly going to fall apart. As money wasn't coming in, soldiers lost their loyalty to the empire, and really an empire built on conquest can't have that. Another theory on why the empire fell was the lack of political participation. Citizens throughout the empire became more concerned with entertainment, like games, than voting and participating in government. Likewise, politicians became incredibly corrupt as citizens became less engaged in their empire. So one of the things is people became so entertained and so kind of using their time to entertainment that they didn't bother to check in with what was happening politically. Because it was becoming really too difficult to rule and manage over such a large empire, in 286 AD, Emperor Diocletian divided the empire in half. This created a permanent division between a Western empire and an Eastern empire. And from this point forward, there would be two empires, one with its power in the center of Rome for the Western Empire, and one with the center of power in Constantinople in the Eastern Empire. It really turned into two empires. And the idea behind this was that it would make it easier to manage, but it really did divide it into two separate places. When we study the Roman Empire, we're really talking about the western half. This is the portion that will decline and fall. The eastern half would go on to exist for another 1,000 years. In 313 AD, an emperor named Constantine came to power, and he decided to end attacks on Christians and allow them to worship freely across the empire. For several hundred years, Christians have been attacked, jailed, beaten by the Romans, and Constantine ended those attacks. He himself converted to Christianity, and the new religion will grow in time across the empire. There was the part of the story is that he was in battle and he saw a sign of Christianity in the sky. It was a sign from God that he would win the battle. He did, and he slowly adopted Christianity over time. One reason or one theory as to why the Roman Empire fell was because of the adoption of Christianity, that some of the ideas of Christianity kind of undermined Roman authority. Of course, one of the largest reasons for Rome's fall, the biggest external reason, was barbarian invasions. The Romans referred to the Germanic people to the north as barbarians, uncivilized people, and these Germanic tribes had been attacking Rome for years. Seeking the riches of the empire, different groups such as the Visigoths, the Franks, and the Huns put lots of pressure on Roman military, and they slowly penetrated the borders. You can see by this map here the different groups that over time attacked Rome, not just Rome, the capital, but parts of the empire. And this didn't happen in one fall swoop. It happened over several hundred years. These invasions took a toll on the empire. And while there were attacks on the Eastern Empire, it was able to defend itself against the attackers. So the East kind of continue on, but it really heavily hurt the Western Empire. Many Germanic rulers and their subjects began to convert to Christianity. Clovis, who was a leader of the Franks, was one of the first Germanic rulers to accept Christianity. So these attacking tribes aren't just attacking Rome to take over, they're kind of becoming a part of the Roman world. They're adopting this now new Roman religion and settling and ruling in Roman lands. The empire fell over many years, but historians use the date of 476 AD as the official end of the Roman Empire. It was in that year that the Visigoths sacked the city of Rome, and once the city of Rome, the center of power, was taken out, really the rest of the empire just kind of crumbled after that. There was no government in place to rule over these lands. These Germanic groups would set up their own small kingdoms and war against each other as the empire was no longer a government. The provinces and districts that were once controlled by the empire were now their own independent kingdoms. So this is our pause and chunk. A couple questions. What were some internal reasons for Rome's fall? That question is what happened inside the empire that caused it to fall apart? And what were some external reasons for Rome's fall? What were some outside reasons that caused the empire to fall apart? Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be the end of part 1 of this video. Part 2 of this video will go over the last chunk, which will be on the legacy of Rome.